thanks again, and we'll bring Steve Smith on. You're fine.
Okay,
No, I think
good.
you're okay.
Great. I also want to thank the SAF and the WAP extension for making this subject available to the public. We have a real serious problem with a lack of expertise, contractors, and processes to address reforestation. It's the many years of lack of funding has really made the expertise either retire or not pass on to the next generation, or they've moved to more lucrative work. So this is really important, and I really am pleased that both CAL FIRE and the Forest Service, who gave CAL FIRE funding to help get this rolling. And again, thank you very much. I am with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. We call it ourselves NRCS, and we're part of the USDA, Department of Agriculture. Let's see, learning how to use this stuff. Okay, again. Right now, we just got a new farm bill, and it just passed. We have, it gives us all our legal authorities to provide financial assistance, especially to forest landowners. Forest landowners are new to the game with NRCS and new in a general sense. The 2008 Farm Bill provided us a lot more guidance and potential of using funding cycles that we are now experiencing here in California. So the 2014 Farm Bill is going to take a while for all the rules to be developed and come out so that we know how to contract projects. We expect kind of similar levels of funding, but it's all about the rules, and every state is in competition with each other for that funding. So it's about how you can present the state itself, present to national offices that we have really critical needs, and we've done well in 2008, and I hope we do as well in 2014. We go through programs, Farm Bill programs, and there's the EQIP program. Everybody has maybe heard about that, the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. And that's our mainstay for all our operations here in California. We have other parts that are there that's not listed here, like the wetland programs and some of the easement programs. However, this is the one we use extensively with private landowners. We used to have something called the Wildlife Habitat Incentive Program, but now it's been combined with EQIP, and about 20%, it's mandated that of something around 20% of the funds that come in with EQIP should be focused on wildlife habitat. So it's kind of the interior to EQIP is the WIP. This provides most forest landowners a lot of opportunity because a lot of what we do is dealing with wildlife habitat, and it's it's a place where wildlife is focus or a potential focus. We also have the Healthy Forest Reserve Program. Only a dozen states really have that program, and we have one that's fairly unique. And we have focused it on its focus is mostly on endangered species and declining habitats. And California, of course, has plenty of endangered species and plenty of declining habitats. So it's been potentially a good one for the next Farm Bill here, that we can tap that and be able to use it. The Conservation Stewardship Program awards good landowners for doing really good activities on their land. They get a check, basically, if they meet the certain guidelines of what's in that. We also are trying to put one together that talks about the drought and how one would have a drought forest management plan, basically addressing pests and soil moisture. CSP for in the past, the last Farm Bill was highly restricted to farmland and rangeland. The cap has been taken off with this new Farm Bill. There's let's go with the next one. Another program that is not a program, it is a program now. Everything's a program. We have the Conservation Technical Assistance, CTA. That is our mainstay of how we have people in the offices that have technical expertise. So we have, engineers, range specialists, irrigation specialists, soil conservationists. Soil conservationist is our main person in the office. And that's what we do the best, is to provide technical assistance to landowners. We'll get into a little bit because, as we just noted, that the 2008 Farm Bill brought in forestry into this, but we didn't increase our forestry staff. We've actually partnered with CAL FIRE and with using technical service providers to get those RPFs, registered professional foresters, to provide technical assistance to landowners who come in and request that. A new thing that we were in California very successful with last time, which was called, last bill it was called the Cooperative Conservation Partnership Initiative, CCPI. They've renamed it, which is very common in a farm bill, to the RCPP, Regional Conservation Partnership Program. We were able to use that for a lot of forestry conservation practices, including reforestation, in different areas of the state. In the North Coast, we did it for salmon. In the Central Sierras, we used water quality as a real issue. And in the Southern Mountains in Southern California, it was declining habitat. And on the Oregon-California border, we looked at oak protection and development. Again, we can, an example here would be looking at the threatened oak woodland with a regional conservation partnership program. That has to come, as you notice, it says partnership, 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 and we would have to have a partner bring that forward, and then the funding comes in with it. That's usually related to EQIP, or Healthy Forest Reserve Program, or the CSP. Okay, this last farm bill, in the last couple of years, we brought over $100 million into California for working landscapes. Since forest lands are last in the NRCS picture, we had basically $10 million per year for the last 2 years, which is pretty significant. And due to fires and other programs, we've actually got the last farm bill close to $60 million on forest lands. And if we want to get down to the back and forth on these things, the landowner, the cost share is usually ends up being about a 50% cost share. If you do the math, that's if you have 40 million came in, then 80 million was on the ground. We're trying to update these things because a lot of the funding, what we spent for last year and the previous year are slow numbers to release to the public. But in general, forestry has done very well with the Farm Bill in California. A lot of conservation has been put on the ground. One thing we do note, and one of the most biggest issues we have is catastrophic fire. Catastrophic fire has a huge impact on water, wildlife, fish, endangered species, you name it. We know that it's a huge effect. So, we're really committed to trying to get funding out as fast as we can. We know, funding cycles are slow and can be a process. But we're committed to try to get, after a fire year, like we've had in '08, and you can go on and on, which years are worse and which ones are not. But we try to get an initiative out there where landowners can get to apply and be basically ranked to the top of the EQIP funding process because it has such a huge effect on our resources. So it may not be 75% cost share every time, but but there is a lot of funding set aside for recovery after fire. Of course, we want to make sure it's clear on it's going to lands that are severely burned, and we use CAL FIRE and the Forest Service to determine what areas are significant if they have those kind of information. We have soil scientists that can do the same. One thing, going back a little bit with our funding, you notice that it was 10% forest land, but with the EQIP program, 50% must go to range, and about 40% of it goes to farmland and farmland protection. So it's the other key thing is that it has to be a working landscape. And part of that working landscape in those other general land uses is you have native hardwoods and riparian forests, and we work with those extensively. Okay, our current situation is that, and it's how we started partnering and started finding out that we really need to start a focus on reforestation. You know, we just field offices coming with people asking for reforestation and actually getting funding for reforestation. You know, here we have uh, basically a million seedlings a year that are in our cost share programs. And it's continuous every year. But we found that landowners are just going across to Washington and Oregon and ordering their trees. And that was, you know, the worst case of conservation you can have. We also found that people were not doing them right. So we really had to pull back and start working with our partners to get the right trees and the right technical information and the right you know, a process that can move fast. We find that, that reforestation is an issue that has to be done quickly, and we're not finding that because of both our process of contracting and the unavailability of seeds, the seedlings that are part of seed zone. So, okay, we're going to go into our process. We like to call it locally led process. It's been kind of changing over time, but basically it's regionally led. But the landowner, it's a landowner based. You go to the field office. The first thing they're going to want to do is, well, one nice thing landowners love to have is a map, you know, with, you know, their property on it. They contact the technical staff there and develop a conservation plan or a forest management plan. We have been really, part of our partnership with CAL FIRE and the Forest Service is to really get landowners to get that forest management plan. We find the forest management plan is one of the best conservation plans, conservation practices we can get on the ground. With the plan, you know, we get that, we do a pretty significant technical review that really brings the professional forester in and gets what we need to have on that site, that technical information on site. So these things tend to be it's a business contract, so they're kind of committed to making their planting, reforestation in a timely fashion. Well, if there's no seedlings available or anything like that, things get really balled up. Or we have a drought or these sort of things. But seedling availability has been the thing that's come to the surface. So one of the other things that NRCS works with is with the RCD, the Resource Conservation Districts. Actually, it's part of our presence within an area is based on having an RCD in the area. It's that local connection, and you know they know the issues that are in the area. With that, our partnership with the El Dorado RCD has been one that we've encouraged more so that it can expand throughout the, develop that network between RCDs. As we've alluded to, the El Dorado RCD is working with the U.S. Forest Service and yes, at Placerville, and seeing if they can grow seedlings for small lots and using local seed sources for those RCDs that would like to have trees or areas where trees are necessary after, let's say, a catastrophic fire or a major reforestation effort. It could be one way of getting some trees ahead of time before the landowner even knows how significant their fire has been. Most landowners after a fire are in shock. You know, they've lost huge amounts of value and personal, it's put a lot of money in their property just to fight the fire and recover from the fire. But trees are the last thing they think about until the following spring when they say, well, I got to order trees. Well, they've lost a whole season. So losing that season is very critical, as we've already talked about. And using a system like this where small lots can be grown immediately right after a fire that's been addressed can be really important for landowners who finally come to reality that they need to have seedlings and they need them soon. So let's go into our conservation practices. We have, within NRCS, dealing with all these land uses, we have nearly 200 conservation practices. But for reforestation, we split it out a lot more than, let's say, CAL FIRE does. They talk about brush in a broad sense or site prep. We split it out to, let's say, brush management, shrub and trees, site prep. Sometimes there's prescribed burning. Sometimes you have to do follow-up with herbaceous weed control. Then you got some unique scenarios with riparian forest buffers or dealing with declining habitats. It's a whole series of practices that really need to have a professional kind of help you through that, or a technical person help landowners through those practices. These following slides are just from Jill Butler. I'm sure Jill will recognize all these things. It's just the background has changed. But a lot of things, like site prep. There's so many different types of site prep and the different costs that go involved with that. We have, parts that when the tree gets planted, you provide some sort of tree shelters or wildlife, protection things, not protection, preventions. There's always some sort of follow-up, whether it's a brush follow-up or dealing with slash disposal. And sometimes you may have to come back more than once. So these things are determined by the professional. Some things are rather complicated. Riparian forest planting is one of those things that require unique species, a different kind of seedling. They cost more, basically, and require a little bit more attention to the preparation. Oak woodland is something we're all getting into more so, and trying to address conifer encroachment, but also with sudden oak death, changing oaks that would be more resistant. There's other practices that can help establish unique scenarios like with aspen and things like that. We have, of course, whenever you're working with a fire or something like that and you're trying to do reforestation, there's always a lot more other things that are involved, and that's that forest management plan or conservation plan helps address or provides guidance to that landowner about what other problems that they may not recognize that are there. And we try to make sure that society's values are addressed on those private lands. So as you can imagine, trying to come up with a cost list for lots of different practices within a practice is somewhat of a challenge. What kind of tree are you going to plant, what size, how many, the cost of planting 100 or 1,000 on one property versus 5,000 is significant. The move-in, move-out costs, that sort of thing. So we've developed these rather extensive payment schedules, but again, we need to have that technical person do that work because a lot of people could abuse this, and it's not a shopping list. A couple other things. We're not here to support the logging industry or the landowner financial industry. We're here to take care of catastrophic or stewardship practices. But, you know, as we just talked about salvage logging, there is such a need to do something with that wood after it's been burned. And we're not going to not reforest or not provide funding for reforestation if the land has been burnt so hard and there are maybe a couple trees that could be salvaged. It's all fine in terms of getting that off, and we paying for or help pay for some of the reforestation costs. But in general, you know, if it's required by law, you know, we don't cost share with that. All right, and that's about all I have for funding with reforestation. Glad to take questions and things like that. I again wanted to make note that we do have a close connection with the Forest Service and CAL FIRE to coordinate our activities. We are light on the technical part. We use CAL FIRE for that. We are light on Forest Service infrastructure, and they help us with that. So we try to work together as much as possible, and as more funding comes with one agency, probably the funding will wane with another one, and that's what we're trying to do, is make sure that the public gets access to needed conservation practices. I'm looking forward to CAL FIRE's reforestation initiative, and again, that forest management plan that we have allows that the forest management plan created by NRCS funding or CAL FIRE funding can go back and forth. And you know, some of the authorities that we have, we can do a lot more work on water quality or wildlife, whereas you know, CAL FIRE may only focus on reforestation and fuel breaks. And as we know, landowners have all the above. So it's being able to use the same plan for multiple conservation practices. And and thank you, Richard, for putting this on. And I'm ready for questions.
Thanks, Steve. That was interesting. And I think you know, the bottom line is that people can apply for EQIP funds, and to do that, they should start with their RCD or start with their district conservationist. That's the place face-to-face to meet somebody who can help you out.
Very much so. It's the NRCS district conservationist is the person to contact, or somebody in that office that can do that for them. But it's at the local level. So you have to use where the property is, use the staff that's within that area. And often we tap the Resource Conservation District's technical expertise if they have some for particular needs.
Okay, Susie, do you have some questions to bring into the middle there? Okay, I'm going to open it up, Susie, so I can see it. I don't know if everybody else can see it. There is a testimonial that one of our, Karen Whitestone, gave us kind of a testimonial saying that she's been working with NRCS for 2 years, one grant for fuel reduction and one for rim fire remediation, and she says it's a very helpful program. She says she's also worked with the EQIP Emergency Conservation Program for cattle fence restoration. Rich Marovich, our buddy from Buda Creek, is asking what numbers are considered small lots for seedling production.
We're finding that we work with smaller landowners on the edge of the seed zones, and 5 acres is often a contract that we have to work with. And if you're, you know, looking at let's say 1,500 trees or you know, less than 5,000 trees is considered by most nurseries a small small lot, and greater than 5,000 actually is a major project. And quite frankly, the process that we'd stock with El Dorado is going to be more expensive than the private nursery. But it's the private nursery has the efficiency of, you know, how things go there. But the issue there is the part of that efficiency is growing larger lots. The handling and treating of small lots is very expensive. But it needs to be done. We need to have it. And if it's not available, people will do something wrong. And planting a bad tree, or a tree in the wrong spot is just a major conservation issue.
Steve, I think on one of the earlier presentations, I think actually Chris Zimney's presentation earlier in the series, they had a list of, it was a handout that you got